Hello, everyone. Welcome. The new academic year has begun, albeit in a form that is definitely unusual for many of us. My name is Shannon Jackson. I'm Associate Vice Chancellor for the Arts and Design, and it is my privilege to welcome you to the first public programming event of A+D season, which also happens to be the first speaker event in A+D Thursdays. As many of you know, this lecture series sits inside a public course that we created over the last several years and offered in new iterations. It's a course that was created to introduce students to a range of creative forms across visual arts, across performance, new media, film, and design, as well as to introduce them to the creative culture of our campus and the Bay Area region. It has a different theme every semester, and I'll be talking a bit more about what this theme is exploring this particular semester. Before I do, however, I want to acknowledge the land on which this course sits, the infrastructure on which it depends. And in doing so, we want to be sure we acknowledge that UC Berkeley is sited on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Ohlone people. As we convene on campus, even when we do so virtually, we recognize not only the Ohlone history, but also that the Ohlone people are active, dynamic, flourishing members of the Berkeley community and the Bay Area community writ large. So for many of us gathered at this course, in this lecture series, on this Zoom grid, Berkeley is a very special place, but we know that we were not the first to recognize or to settle or to celebrate the exceptional place that we have the privilege of calling our campus. As it happens, this course, Letters and Sciences 25, Explorations Across Arts and Design, has also, thinking through arts and design, has also been a place that has continually thought about the politics of place, whether under themes of migration and transformation, the architecture of life, or last semester's course on public art and belonging. We're going to be continuing an investigation of place in different form with this course. If you've had a chance to look at the syllabus or at the lineup of speakers, you know that this course's theme will explore visual culture and the aesthetics of the digital, a theme that is uncannily resonant for our campus at this time, and of course for our country and for the world, as we experience so much in terms of connection and gathering online. So the digital and its aesthetics are going to be both object of study and method of study throughout this course. When we put together a new iteration for our fall semester, we set about looking for a faculty member to lead this charge, and we felt so lucky to have Professor Greg Niemeyer step up to the plate to do so. Many of you know him from campus or know him as a Bay Area artist. He is a data artist and professor of media innovation, whose work focuses on data circulation and on creating poetic structures that materialize data and its impact on our lives. Niemeyer's art projects are vast and wide. I'll just signal Waterbell, Ice Core Walk, the Network Paradox. All of these projects, which you may ask him about, work across disciplines, always with an eye toward trying to identify the poetic foundations of technical protocols. So we couldn't imagine anyone more perfect to lead our investigation and exploration this semester. He and A+D's program coordinator, Paris Coates, have been putting together an incredible speaker series to join with this course. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the lineup, and you know then how indebted we are to both of them for having produced a series that I know is going to be spectacular and bracing and just what we need at this moment. So I want to pass the spotlight to Greg to introduce our first speaker. but not before asking you to offer a muted or unmuted applause with thanks to Paris and Greg for all that they've done for us. Mine will be unmuted. Fiat lux and go Bears, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon, for that beautiful introduction. And I'm really honored to be in this position to be able to bring people together to discuss visual cultures. Of course, right now in our minds is visual cultures in the form of cell phone justice, in this form of the proliferation of images that describe the reality that we live in different places around the world so quickly and so radically and so urgently that we all are inspired to rethink our values and take actions in different ways and evolve as a culture. So visual images definitely help us advance our culture and help us see things in new ways. I want to also acknowledge that this course is public, which Shannon, of course, mentioned. It's a gift of the University of California to everybody, specifically to you all who are here right now in the room. And we also want to acknowledge that many people from around the world are joining us. I specifically want to acknowledge my mother-in-law, Miss V, who's joining us from St. George, Utah. And I also want to acknowledge our two graduate student instructors, Hala Kadura and Edgar Fabian Frias, who are among the panelists and who are going to take your questions today. I'm now going to switch to a few slides just to introduce our esteemed guest speaker, Isabella Kirkland. Okay, what are you seeing now?
A mixture of things.
Okay, that was not the right one. We want to have this one here. That's strange. It's not working like it's supposed to. All right, let's try this again. Share. It just worked a moment ago, and but that's okay. That's part of image cultures as well, isn't it? So, try this again. Still this, huh? Still strange.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to do it like this. That's fine. Do you see the slides at this point or not?
We just, oh, it's white.
It's
and it
white.
says you're viewing Greg Niemeyer's screen.
Huh, that is unusual. That never happened before. And we did rehearse this, so that's strange. Let's try this again, a slightly different way. We got this, we're professionals. There we go. One more try here. There we go. And one more step here, present. And then we go back here. And back here and back here. Do you see the slides now?
No.
Now?
Now we do. Event
Okay.
protocol?
Yep, so good, thank you. All right, so this is our logo, of course, Berkeley Arts and Design. Today we're talking about material longevity with Isabella Kirkland, who's joining us from beautiful Sausalito, California, directly from her studio, which is very, very exciting. It's like a studio visit. It's a very rare privilege to visit an artist's studio, and we're very honored to be led into her world that way. An infectious spirit of care emanates from Isabella Kirkland's paintings. Every time I look at them, I feel deeply moved by the love and affection she brings to the natural world. Their transcendent and surrealism at first seems historic as it retrieves an antiquated style, which is kind of like Dutch painters or Audubon style painters. But a closer look shows that this is really a painting of today. It reveals animals and flowers that are endangered species, often from a specific part of the world, and the colonial aesthetic reverses itself into an aesthetic of attention and accountability, meaning that we should care for these animals more than we do. And with her way of rendering these animals, she manifests that care and inspires us to care and be accountable ourselves for the fellow species on this planet. In this talk, Kirkland will dive into the deep histories and meanings of her rendering of a natural world in transformation. I have to say that Isabella's knowledge of the world, and both in a natural world and political world, is truly encyclopedic, and there's so much she has to say about the things she renders. She's an incredibly knowledgeable scholar of the objects and creatures that she paints. For example, I learned last time that both Suriname and New York were colonies of the Dutch colonial period, and that the Dutch abandoned New York in order to maintain their control of Suriname, which is something I would have never thought. So you're going to learn many things about that as well today, and illuminate colonial experience from yet another perspective. Working in the classic naturalistic tradition of John James Audubon and other wildlife painters, Isabella Kirkland subtly blends the form to address ecological challenges facing the world in the age of global warming. Her paintings, which often fuse the style of Dutch master still lifes, offer tender interactions of plants and animals, shadowed by the understanding that the planet is in flux. This planet is in flux. And we see it every time. We feel it right now with the incredible smokes in the air from the fires around the Bay Area. It's a planet whose environment is radically changing. In recent years, Kirkland has worked on 3 interwoven series of paintings, Gone, Surrected, and New, that respectively depict species that have been extinct, rescued, or freshly discovered. Please welcome me and join me in welcoming Isabella Kirkland, again with a round of applause. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to wish you better luck than myself in switching to screens, okay? Isabella, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. Much appreciated. And welcome to my studio. Hopefully this will go smoothly. We'll see. I'm going to give you a quick little roundabout view of my shop. That's a piece I just finished. A small one on the easel. I'm sorry, I work with a lot of glazes, so you will get glare. This is Father Time, that is of all of animals where the males do a significant portion of the baby care. I'm working on that project with Sarah Hurdy, who's a marvelous anthropologist at Davis. She wrote a magnificent book called Mother Nature. That piece, this is Forest Floor. I'll show it to you again in a minute. I have a very serious brush fetish. Every single brush does something different, so I rarely throw them out.
Do you make some of your own brushes, Isabella?
I do make my own brushes. Let's see if we can see them clearly. Many of these I made. I came up with the idea of building a capo for a brush so that I can, they're really great for doing feathers. If I want to do striations, I'll use a feather that I've stripped and mounted. These are a few pieces that I'm not going to show you later in the talk. They're both quite recent. It's hard for me to show them and see them at the same time. Most of these are Euronid moths from Africa. This one's still driving me crazy. I haven't quite finished that one. So a quick studio visit so you know where you are. I am on landfill in Sausalito, so I should probably thank the oysters, since they are probably the ones who were here before we are. And I guess I can go right ahead and start my little talk. You can see well enough. Hopefully that, something happened. No, that is not what I wanted to have happen.
Right.
Pardon me. There.
That's working. That's working beautifully, yep.
Okay, great. What I want to talk about today is the longevity of objects. and what I'm trying to accomplish by using longevity. What you're looking at, first of all, I've made objects ever since I could make things. I've been a compulsive maker my whole life. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And the first 25 years of my life, I spent making sculpture, basically, and installations. They were kind of like a set that you walked into and you had to figure out the script. The little film you're watching is a piece from 1978 called Re-Cinema. It's a pixelated film of the cinema building itself. And in the end, 2 people could sit inside the theater and actually watch this pixelated film. I showed it with 4 or 5 other buildings similar, including a book library that was filled with handmade books. Everything was, even though it was handmade, there was a strong conceptual basis for everything I did. But the objects were temporary, and they owned the whole piece only operated as long as the exhibit was up. And I've spent the last 25 years of my life working on paintings, very, very different, and the opposite, really, of temporary. This piece is a 3 by 6 foot painting of plants and animals that are all new to Western science. So I say new to Western science because on the far right, there's a plant, it's a begonia that has a red stem. That is called Begonia lazat. The word lazat means delicious in Malay. So this plant was not new to the people who lived with it. It was only new to the Western scientific canon. This painting, like most of my big paintings, all of the animals are at life size so that they are in the correct correlative relationship to one another. There are 11 species of caterpillars, 9 new species of ants, 5 new species of fish, lots of butterflies, and even in the far lower right, there's a purple frog that's a new family of frogs. So it's very deep in the lineage of all frogs. And yes, there really are striped bunny rabbits in the world. They're from the sort of Golden Triangle, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam area. And in doing paintings, of course, I got interested in the history of painting and in longevity itself. And it made me wonder why, just exactly why do we want to study objects from the past? On the left is an elephant mask from Cameroon from about the mid-1800s. And on the right is a Fayum burial portrait from the 3rd century of Roman Egypt. We can read these objects. We can learn about the technology, where the beads come from, what kind of weaving did they use, what kind of fibers did they use to make the mask, and we can read about, we can learn about religious thought, we can learn about cultural thought. And I think we like comparing our world to their world. They're still asking the same questions. What are you afraid of? What is death for? How do we understand life? Life was short and it was brutal then, and life's a little longer now, but we're still asking the exact same questions. I think we also like to look back at objects from the past because they survived, for that very reason. The goldfinch by Carol Peterson Fabricius is very famous now from the book and the film. And it's just a little snapshot. It's a snapshot in time, a beautifully rendered moment. The other painters of his period thought he was the best, the very best. And we have very few of his paintings left, and that's because of an accident. His studio was near the Armory in Amsterdam. And when the Armory blew up, it killed him and destroyed most of his paintings. So this little piece has kind of a double meaning of having survived. It survived disaster. What else is it that makes things not survive? Neglect is a big one. If you hang a great old painting somewhere near your kitchen, it's going to get covered with cooking grease. So neglect is one. Most people don't know art custodial practices. Accident, like Fabricius, natural disaster, flood, volcano, fire is pretty pertinent right now. Poor execution is if somebody builds something that's not structurally sound, Changing taste is another destructor of things. Astonishing objects and documents have been found in thrift shops. You know, Keens come to mind, you know, the big eye paintings. There were a lot of those in thrift shops for a while. War is a great destructor. And just fugitive materials in general, materials themselves that just break down over time. So those are some of the things that can cause art objects to disappear. And these are some of the things that can influence its survival. Price is a good one. People hate to lose money, they really do. And if something costs a lot of money, then it will be shipped carefully, handled carefully, stored carefully. Personal care and protection is another big one. I remember in 1966, I wanted to fly there too, but I was too little. There was a flood on the Arno in Florence, and there's a fabulous library on the shores of the river, and conservators from all over the world flew to Florence to try to save books. My mom had to talk me out of trying to go when I was like 12. Being made of durable materials is a great way for things to survive. A lot of our history of North American native peoples is because they left so many stone artifacts, and we've been able to learn amazing things from those artifacts. Mastery is something that I think helps objects survive. When you're holding or beholding an object that you just can't believe was possible to be made by human hands, it's not going to get thrown out. That object is going to get saved. So awe is a way to preserve objects. Beauty, the fact that you're looking at the original object, not a reproduction of it, I think protects objects. And so does mass production. We have a lot of glass left from Egypt and every other period throughout history. We also have a lot of cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia and Phoenicia, and that are, you know, grain receipts and records of shipping. But there were a lot of them, so some of them survived. You're looking now at a little branch of an apple tree, complete with some diseased apples on it. And this is actually made from glass. It's not a branch. It was from the Blaschka collection of botanical reproductions at Harvard. They're incredibly exact. They are to scale. And no one has ever been able to figure out how this father and son team made them. So you don't have to be a scientist or an artist to recognize that this is a truly astounding object made by humans. Everyone can recognize that these are very, very cool objects. The kind of pinnacle of realistic painting is this often called the Dutch still life period. It goes from about 1550 to 1700 in the Netherlands. This is a great example. It's a still life by Jan Davidson de Heem. It's not very big. I've stared at this painting for hours. There are 31 different bugs in it. And you know exactly what kind of bug. You know if it's a lacewing or a housefly. Common to many of the Dutch still life paintings, and interestingly, a lot of the flowers in this picture came through trade through Suriname, because that's partly why there were so many flower paintings done in Holland and the Netherlands during that period, is because they were getting them from Suriname in the New World in South America. Every single brushstroke in this painting is perfectly placed. They are so beyond perfect, it's hard to even fathom. The concept of memento mori is kind of wrapped all around the genre of still life painting. And memento mori are suggestions or reminders of the temporary nature of life. Caterpillars representing metamorphosis, dropped flowers, dropped petals, cut flowers at all. They're very short-lived. So this painting has lasted 400 years. If you notice right in the middle, there's a yellow flower that looks a little dead. And that is because even though de Heem was a master himself, he used a pigment that didn't stay. So that central kind of yellowy gold flower is one of the few parts of his painting that actually has changed over time. But it basically is 400 years old and still looks great. So how old are the oldest oil paintings? The oldest ones we know of in the world are from about the year 650, or so they're approaching 1400 years old. This is a portrait of a Buddha painted on a cave wall near Bamiyan, Afghanistan. It's the same cave complex that used to house the gigantic Buddhas that were blown up by the Taliban in 2001. So war is always destructive to objects. I mean, I think it was Napoleon's cannons that blew the nose off the Sphinx. So war doesn't care what it destroys. Without getting too technical, I mean, because I'm concerned about making my paintings last, I've done a good bit of research on what constitutes a permanent pigment, who decides what's permanent, what they study to determine what is light fast, what degree of light fastness. And without getting too technical, many of you have probably seen the two little seals on the top that are, you can look up every part of that. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but you can, I'll be happy to share this information with you if you email me. It's a great set of resources of who determines what's light fast. And they're all good resources for learning about the permanence and the health standards of art materials. So I started teaching myself to paint in about 1990. I did it for a number of different reasons. I was tired of hauling crap around. Sculpture's hard to store. But mostly, I art directed films for a few years, and I was sick of the waste. And painting just takes a few tablespoons of materials in order to make an object. And it was the very opposite of temporary. And I liked this idea that they could last over time. This is, I think it's a female Bullock's oriole, I've forgotten, and it's the best of my ability, I've identified it, that hit a window and broke her wing and died. Window strikes account for somewhere between 400 and 900 million bird deaths a year, and that's in the US alone. This painting was part of a series of about 30 or 40 that I did that all kind of came under the rubric of nature in the margins. In this series, I was sorting through materials and methods to try to figure out how to make things well that suit me and that I think could last. This little painting, Night Blooming Ceres, was kind of toward the end of that cycle, and I had figured out that if I painted on very fine polyester using A and AA light rated pigments, and I used an alkyd medium, then everything, as long as I kept those in really solid continuous layers, all of those parts, both the ground that I was painting on, the gesso, acrylic gesso I was using, and the alkyd medium, they're all of those chemically form polymer chains. And the theory was that, that the molecules that are linked would become stronger over time, and that there's no difference between the substance I'm painting on and the material of the paint medium that I'm using. I had the dumb luck to sit next to the chief conservator of the National Gallery of London once at dinner, and I just picked his brain, and he said, well, you have as good a chance as anybody else of having your stuff last. I still think of paintings as objects, and I still have the same sort of conceptual reason for making them. There's a message behind whatever I do. And as 2000 approached, and there was all the hubbub around the Y2K and the millennium, a light bulb went off, and it wouldn't have happened. I don't think I would have had this idea if all these things hadn't kind of come together at one time. I got a mailer from the Nature Conservancy, the 500 most endangered species in the United States. We are most definitely in the 6th mass extinction. I got snowed in somewhere and looked at a great exhibit of Dutch still lives. People that I know were founding the Long Now Foundation here in the Bay Area that was built to foster long-term thinking. Instead of a company having a 5-year plan, what about a 30-year plan? They're also building a clock that should run for 10,000 years. It's an analog clock, and it is approaching completion, I believe. through Long Now, I heard a talk from someone at NASA who, in his talk, mentioned that they would not be able to access their own data from the first moonshot because no one kept the machines, not to mention the software. So, you know, digital permanence is a question too. But all of these things came together for me, and a light bulb went off, and I thought, oh, I'll just make a Dutch still life on the idea of endangered species right now. So I did, and I never expected it to leave my studio or to work, and it blew my own socks off. I didn't know I could do it, but anyway, this is Descendant from 1999. It's 4 feet by 3 feet. Everything in it is at life size and as accurate as I could get it. They are the species I could get to see. I did not have any scientific credibility or track record at the time, so I had to just beg and ask questions and use libraries. But it succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, this wildlife, you know, I mean, crazy still life of flowers and animals and birds. But with it, I realized that I had this way to talk about something with some permanence, and it's an interesting idea to me. In the upper left is an iwi from Hawaii, an endangered bird. It's got a severely recurved bill, and I'll show you a flower that is the reason it has a recurved bill in a minute. On the right are some prairie orchids from the Central Plain states. There are hardly any long grass prairies left. Actually, the golden toad is from Costa Rica. I put a mistake in every painting, so just like the Hopi rugs, just so that I'm not pretending to be God. I mean, I make plenty anyway, but this one I put in on purpose, and because I looked for it on my honeymoon. It hasn't been seen since 1989. I've sold this painting, and all I have left is copyright that I own and a slide originally. And I started thinking, all right, I've updated the slide, but what is digital longevity and how long do things last on a platform? So the top part of this list is all the different hardwares that have existed since the 40s for storing data. And that figure at the bottom, 1566, according to Wikipedia, I had to count them all, is the number of distinct operating systems that have been in existence for all of these platforms. You know, the lion's share of them in the last 10 years. You know, Long Now is still making analog objects. Crossing time digitally is difficult. Central to my sort of biological drive with all of this work is an idea that's expressed really well in the next two slides. This happy guy you're looking at caught all of those fish in one day at a dock in Key West. I think most of those fish are bigger in mass than his family altogether, each fish. This is the same dock, one day's catch now. None of those fish are bigger than 12 inches. Most of them are juveniles. Many of them are too young to reproduce yet. And the concept of shifting baselines is sort of the idea that you see plenty in your life. You see a lot and you think that's normal. But this is only, 60 years ago that this was the same dock and what you could expect to catch. This is now. So the concept of shifting baselines is, I think, sort of fundamental to why I make this work at all. I'm trying to do it as a benchmark, to set a baseline for now. So that's what I've done. That's what I've been working on. Back on the left is species that have gone to the brink of extinction and either been very carefully husbanded back, or they have been refound somewhere in a little remnant. It's based on kind of an X composition. Everything is at life size and correlative. On the right is Gone, which is all things that are extinct at the full species level. I made a mistake there on purpose too. And this is much more of a figure 8 composition. The research for this piece was very long and very difficult. I often compound museum visits. I try to see everything before I paint it so that I know really what it looks like, and I take my own measurements and photographs. This is a detail from Gone that's one of my favorite passages I've ever painted. Surrounding this passenger pigeon are extinct Hawaiian draponid flowers, and you notice the bill on the iiwi is curved. The whole set of Hawaiian honey creepers have gone extinct except for the iiwi, along with these flowers, because the bill and the flower were perfectly suited to one another. The birds pollinated and got nectar, and the flowers had to defend themselves and against the birds taking all the nectar and not pollinating. So it's kind of an ecological war. So in order to paint things accurately, I have to research them. I don't think I would have been able to understand the iridescence on the neck of this bird if I had not held it in my hand. So I try to go see everything I'm going to paint. I can't always, but I do what I can. And each painting begins as a database that includes, on the far right, who to contact to try to be able to get into a museum to see a specimen. Since I started doing this work, I'm now a research associate at the California Academy of Sciences, and that grants me the delicate and ability to go to other museums and ask for appointments. At the bottom is just it's a drawing of a little shell, but I wanted to know exactly how to paint it. So I took my own measurements of it so that I could get it accurate. If I'm going to go to all this trouble to do it, I might as well do it right. This is Canopy from, I don't know when, I've forgotten when they are, but it's part of a 4-cycle painting I did on new species. Forest floor was one of them. They depicted sort of an imaginary set of levels in a rainforest. This is a traditional painting. It's a great big branch covered with epiphytes and mosses and whatnot, but it's a new way of using realism to me. This is a detail from it. Every little piece of lichen is newly described to Western science. I was inspired to do this work too because I was in a rainforest after a windstorm, and there were orchids the size of your pinky finger, the entire plant. So I've made 10 of these sort of benchmark paintings that I want to send into the future as baselines. While doing that, I'm also trying to use them in the here and now. This project is all painting butterflies from something called ABRI, the African Butterfly Research Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. Notice these are all mutants. These are genetic mutant butterflies. The painting's 12 inches by 12 inches. And my reason for doing that is that ABRI, 5.5 million specimens strong from all the continent of Africa and Madagascar, is currently living in some buildings in the director's backyard, and it needs a permanent home. It's a vast undertaking. So far, no one has stepped forward to help with this. So I'm just making the paintings to raise the awareness of the plight and the future of ABRI. These butterflies are really hard. They're both iridescent and translucent, but I am counting on the beauty of them and the beauty of the painting to carry forward both the painting and the message. This picture shows a meadow in New York with species that could have lived there. They don't anymore. It's called Palisades, and in 2017 I sold it at auction through Christie's. The auction raised enough money to buy a 49,000 hectare cloud forest in Guatemala. It is the largest contiguous, so all in one piece, and primary, so that it's never been cut, cloud forest left in Central America, and the effort is to try to put it aside and keep the peoples who live there in good enough health and well enough employed and educated enough so that they don't need to take from the forest. It can be left alone for a while anyway. It's in Cerro May, Guatemala. This project, the only one that I've ever made a soundtrack for, which is be fun to go back and do the others, was done with the State Department. And when the State Department builds a new building in any country, they build an art program, an art collection that's about half local people and half from the US. And because I have followed Dutch still lives and paint in that fashion, when they were building a building in Paramaribo, Suriname, they asked me to make a piece for it. Suriname's the most culturally diverse place I've ever been in my life, as well as biologically diverse, hence the title, Coexistence. It is run by a dictator. He's the jaguar in the middle. It's such a poor country that most of the people will never get to see any of these animals. But every single plant, seed, flower, vine, piece of grass is used by them medicinally. So I wanted to include something that those people would know and understand and be familiar with. I was supposed to go this year to take posters I made of this painting to all the schools and libraries, but of course, maybe next year. We're not traveling this year. This is whenever I do a big piece, I include the science with it, shown in one way or another, either as wall text or a hand-carried piece. This is one side shows the key to the species and often has some other little information on that key. And on the reverse side are individual stories about highlighting species within the painting, but collectively the stories try to elucidate the subject of the painting. This Coexistence is in a nice climate-controlled building, so it's got a head start on surviving. The nudibranch project was a fun one. It was my opening salvo on working on marine species. This is 206 species of sea slugs. And yes, they really are that color. They look like they were made by Dale Chihuly and invented by Dr. Seuss, but they are real. They range from about 1 millimeter in size to about 500 or 20 inches, nothing to 20 inches. Had to paint the top row with a straight pin because they're so small. Nudibranchs are at every ocean and at every single depth, including the thermal vents, and yet hardly anyone knows of them at all. So that's my rubric for marine species moving forward. Nudibranchs are cannibals. They have all sorts of very peculiar sexual habits, including a kind of penile fencing. They're mostly hermaphrodites. They're very strange animals. They defend themselves by burying, self-ejecting parts. They can phosphoresce. They can exude toxic junk out of some special pores. And even the purple one on the lower right eats anemones, and instead of digesting, it redeploys the anemone's own stinging cells. So they're fascinating little critters. They're often called the butterflies of the sea. And yes, they're colorful, but it's mainly because they're very good indicators of the health of their locale. If there are a lot of nudibranchs, the reef is healthy. This is a piece I just finished. You might have seen them in my shop. I made them in reaction to COVID, really, early this spring, when I just wanted to paint a bunch of green because it's hopeful, and they were things just bursting with life, and it just was an instant reaction. So I'm calling that series Super Green. I've got 4 of them working. In the future, I'm planning to work on squat lobsters. Nobody's ever heard of them either. They're at every depth of every ocean. And they're one of the largest bycatch creatures of the world, of the ocean. They're just thrown out because we don't eat them. I'm also planning a project on ghost pipefish, one of only 2 male animals we know in the world that actually carries the eggs and gives birth. And I wanted to include them because I just found a paper on these guys where if a pregnant male ghost pipefish meets a really boss alpha female, he will either abort or self-absorb the eggs he's carrying and go for the new one, the new, more alpha female. Very strange and peculiar behavior. This is one of my favorite paintings I've ever made. It's of extinct paradise parrots. They're from New South Wales, Australia. And this is just the way they are in the drawer, complete with their little labels of when they were found and who found them. a true memento mori. I hope the painting lasts long enough for people to learn from us, learn something from us, at least, if not what we understand about nature, what we misunderstand about nature. Again, another drawer full of extinct birds. These are Bachman's warblers. They were one of Audubon's favorite birds. When something goes extinct, there's a gap. We're left with a gap in the fabric that builds the environment this animal inhabited. We're left with remorse, and we have some remains. You know, it's possible that this box full of birds may not last another 100 years, but maybe the painting will, if it's lucky. So if you want to address long-term global issues and make objects that go into the future, you've got to make them out of really durable materials, make them well, and keep your data backed up. Thank you very much for having me. Now, what do I have to do? Anything?
You have to bow, and we'll give you applause. Thank you so much. What a beautiful talk. And from the comments, I can tell many people were really inspired, and you're getting a lot of thank yous there. And thank you to the participants in the audience for sharing your thoughts and feelings. Now, it's a time to ask questions, and I believe Hala and Edgar are ready to take over. And they will read out the questions to you, Isabella, and you can just answer as you are. And you can turn off the slides if you want, so we can see you full screen again.
Okay, so what do I have to do to that? Stop sharing?
Stop sharing, yeah.
Okay. All right, there we go.
There
Okay, fire away.
Hi.
I'll do my best.
Isabella, thank you so much. That was incredible. And we have so many comments. People are just blown away. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with the first question. It's from Sharon Lowe. How does your knowledge on sculpture contribute to your works as a researcher today?
Oh, interesting. You know, I think I still look at a painting as an object. I'm not doing it for the painting's sake. I'm doing it for the sake of what the object can accomplish out in the world immediately and for the future. I still use a lot of sculptural practices. You know, a lot of people ask me why my paintings are smooth, and it's because I sandpaper them. I take my brush strokes out. So I have taken paintings and cut them in half. If I've got a good piece and a bad piece, I'll just cut off the good piece and keep that. You know, I'm still treating them like objects, not like they are sacrosanct as a painting.
Thank you. We're gonna go with another question. Sorry for pronouncing the names wrong. Guadalupe, Kirkland's art shows a very realistic and vivid image of wildlife. How does she manage to display so much detail and remain patient throughout the whole process of completing her artwork?
That's a two-part question. One is, you know, I'm sure you've heard people talk about the flow state that you get into when you're working on something really well. Programmers talk about it. I get in that frame and everything else in the world disappears. So it's a meditative state. I am a trained taxidermist, so I got used to being able to see creatures up close and learn things like the fact that birds have eyelashes, and you would never know that if you didn't get close. And I also, well, I have a spinal cord injury, so when I paint, I don't hurt. So I have a great biological feedback loop to just keep going. And I like, you know, not everyone gets to see the things that I see in museums, and through holding them and observing them very closely, I get to share those tiny details that other people don't get to see and that you won't notice on a wild animal either. I hope that answers.
Thank you. I never actually thought about eyelashes of animals or birds.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. Edgar, do you have more questions?
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. And just for the folks who are here with us, just want to remind you that if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A section. Right now I'm going to pick a question from one of the students from our class, but I will pick the next one from the Q&A area. So this question comes from Isabel Reich. She says, Isabella Kirkland's paintings immediately draw the viewer in with their colorful, hyper-realistic features. Upon further inspection, however, her work delves into an exploration of deeply rooted societal issues such as colonialism, imperialism, and extinction. I'm curious as to how Kirkland's paintings dispel false narratives about colonialism and imperialism. Additionally, I wonder what she predicts the legacy of her work will look like and what kind of dialogue it will prompt for you to come.
That's a complicated question. You know, I certainly can't answer how they will be looked at in the future. You know, I mean, history shifts as we go through it, and often what is intended by an object is not how it ends up being interpreted in the future. I do try to draw people in, and I do try to slow them down. The average amount of time spent in front of an art object is something like 12 seconds. You know, I'm shooting for 20 minutes. And because I think that when you can slow people down and they're in this sort of, I don't want to call it awe because I don't think I'm that good a painter, but there's kind of an amazement phase of mind. And I think when you're in that phase, you're open to new ideas. And so I think, you know, I'm trying to change people's minds a little bit about what our relationship is to nature very directly. I am working in the Western scientific canon and the Western artistic tradition. I'm just trying to use both of those a little differently. Does that help? I'm not sure if that answered, but.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much, Isabella. So this next question that I have is from the Q&A here, and it's from Ashley Arizabal, and it says, how does Kirkland go about planning the composition for use?
That's tricky. I built architecture. I've done a lot of stuff to keep myself going before I started making paintings that would actually sell. And from architecture, from an architect, I started using tracing paper. So I begin with a database that has all the scale information, and then I do scale drawings of every single thing, so I know how big it is. And then I have to use the several largest pieces to come up with some arrangement that makes sense in this imaginary space I've invented. And then I have to figure out something that makes them make sense in that space, either steps or an outdoor scene or a vase or something. And then I'll take all the individual little drawings and try to fit them together. And since it's tracing paper, I can see through them all. And then I have to redraw everything that's in the right position once I figure out where it's going to go. So it's a tedious process. I usually spend about 3 months researching, 3 to 4 months drawing, and then the rest of the 6 months that it usually takes me a year to make a piece is painting. So, I mean, I overlap, you know, research and drawings. I mean, I'm usually have a couple of projects going at once, but basically these big paintings take me about a year a piece. And, you know, I try to just keep the eye always moving and balance the colors. And there've been many times when I'm going like, if I only had a red butterfly, I could make this composition work. But they're tricky. They're not easy.
Thank you. Do you want to ask a question, Hala?
Sure. Greg, do you think we have more time for questions? Should we give 5 more minutes? I think you're muted.
Yes, we can take a few more questions. How about Meredith Trumbull's question?
Hi, Meredith.
Okay, Meredith. Thank you for sharing the research techniques you've developed as well as the work. Could you say more about your work with Sarah Bluffer, Hardy, or other scientists in regards to how the collaboration works?
Great question. You know, when I first started asking, I just started asking questions at Cal Academy in Berkeley too. And I think so many scientists have been incredibly generous with their time in answering my questions and letting me use the collections. And I'm really grateful to Cal Academy for allowing me to be a research associate there, because it does mean that other scientists, other museums will let me use their collections. Sarah Hrdy, who wrote one of my favorite books of all time, Mother Nature, and her husband Dan it started that they just said they wanted to buy a painting, and then I thought, well, it'd be fun to work with her on what it is, and she's working on the project called Father Time, so it's not even my title, it's hers, and it's her list of animals that she's researching, trying to understand how and why male care sort of fell out of the mammalian line, or why it's still there. And so the animals that I'm painting for that are the animals that Sarah is researching herself. And she's a lovely person, and it's a great joy to work with her. I have to say that about so many scientists I've worked with. John McCosker, who used to run the Steinhardt Aquarium and is now retired from Cal Academy, and a suite of amazing scientists have allowed me to research, to do the work that I'm doing. And in some way, I hope it supports in general what they're doing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I think there's so many more questions. I'll try to summarize a couple more. Kelp forest in California, what's your prognosis?
I'm no predictor. All I can do is hope. The nudibranchs, we don't know whether they'll be susceptible to ocean acidification. What makes it through this Anthropocene and this current extinction is anybody's guess. The less highly evolved, the less niche evolved an organism is, the greater chance it has of survival. So if it's very particular to place, then it's going to have a harder time surviving.
Thank you. One more quick one. Animals in captivity and the protein industry.
Wow. Well, I was a taxidermist, so I have kind of a strange attitude to some of this stuff. If you're going to eat it, you ought to be able to kill it, So I'm not a great fan of, I'm not a vegan, but I don't think that humans need to be eating at the top of the food chain all the time. And as a rare moment, that's fine. I don't want to get into the whole, completely anti-animal thing, but a lot of the world still doesn't have enough protein, and it's hard to expect them to be vegan. So, this is a problem for the West, not for the rest of the world. There's still a lot of the parts of the world that are getting by on rice. So that's a complex question and hard to answer right now.
There's many, yes, but you've answered them all really well, and your work was so profoundly inspiring. You certainly took us to the top of the culture chain, if that exists, and really inspired all of us with your care and attention. And thank you so much for joining us. Let's give you a round of applause.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Paris. Thank you all.
I just want to mention that our next speaker is going to be coming on soon, next week on Thursday, obviously, and always at noon, and we hope to see you here again. Isabella, it'd be great to have you in the audience as well, so you can keep part of the conversation. And I'm putting in a link here in the chat where everybody can hop on to the next talk. Ariana Schindler is going to talk about something totally different, because we're talking about visual cultures here, and we have a wide range of visual cultures. So her topic is going to be, she's a designer, and she takes visibility to a confrontational level with her subversive designs for the countercultural fashion brand Damage Group. So many animals like to hide in the greens, and there's a whole thing to be said about camouflage. Probably your bunnies are striped because of camouflage, but humans like to stand out. And why is that? And so we're going to go from one extreme of mysterious forest camouflage to the next of like nightclub wear and standing out in the lights of the night. And so we're looking very much forward to that and to the diversity of ideas that are coming together through this lecture series. With that, again, I'd like to thank Isabella for spending the lunch hour with us, and Indeed, maybe Paris, you want to say something about the recording and where we can find the recording in the end?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Isabella. That was awesome. You can find everything on Berkeley Arts and Design YouTube channel. It's pretty easily Googleable. I put it in the chat. I can put it in again.
Yeah,
It'll
please
be
do.
up in a few days. Bear with us. But hopefully all these talks with the speaker's approval will be posted on YouTube.
Thank you, Paris. Thank you,
Thank
Greg.
you.
All right. Well, have a good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us from around the world and from our class. And we'll see you all again on Tuesday in class and on Thursday with the next lecture. Okay, we'll hit the leave button and all magically disappear, but your experience will remain within our hearts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Take care. Congratulations.